I've seen an awful lot of folks speculating about why exactly Trump decided to attack Venezuela, a sovereign nation, abduct Maduro and his wife, and bring them back to the States for a trial. And I've seen all of the sarcastic tweets or blue sky posts, because I'm not on Twitter, that are like, oh, weird that we can try a foreign president in the United States, but not our own. I've been out with a couple of my kids for most of the day because it's my eldest kid's birthday. And one of my daughters was like, weird for the FIFA Peace Prize president to go attacking another country. Isn't that weird? I understand dark humor is important right now. I understand that people are just like swirling with all of these theories about why Trump engaged in this action. And I do not for a second pretend to be an expert on South American politics. I'm not going to pretend that that is an area where I have an awful lot of insight. But I was having a conversation with my kid who just took a class on South American political history. Like she just studied this, and we were chatting about it. And she's like, yeah, I think a lot of Americans, including you, Mom, don't really understand the ways that so many of these South American countries have really leaned pretty hard into their socialist rhetoric, even if it's authoritarian in nature. I know that there's a lot of talk about how Trump and Maduro had beef because Maduro considered himself a socialist dictator and Donald Trump hates everything socialism. I think it's a little bit more than that, right? So my kid was saying, well, you understand that these South American countries, like their current political kind of perspective is very much informed by all of our American imperialist, neoliberal, capitalist interference in their countries for years and years and years. So they don't want these for-profit oil companies. They don't want these big corporations coming in and exploiting their resources, taking all of that wealth and bringing it back to the United States. And of course, our oil companies want access to Venezuelan oil, right? And so I think I agree with people who are saying that's part of the motivator. I think it's a little overly simplistic, just like it was with the Iraq War, to say the only motivation is oil. I often talk about how in permaculture, we have this concept called stacking functions, where we have one action or one element in our system, and we try to get as many yields out of that action or that element as possible. And you know what? The fascists they're real good at that. One action serves many purposes, right? It's not hardly ever just one motivation. Right? Trump is now saying that the United States is going to run Venezuela. It's absolutely about regime change. It's absolutely about corporations here, living in this kleptocracy, living where the oligarchy and the billionaires are fucking all of us. They just want to expand that fuckery everywhere, and any other country that is going to be resistant to that is a problem. And I'm not like a Maduro fan. I understand that there are a lot of people that are really happy that he's been ousted. But like low-key, y'all, America is not the world police, and Donald Trump is not our sheriff. Marco Rubio is not our sheriff. And let's be real, this has nothing to do with justice whatsoever. So I do think, yeah, like oil is part of it. Donald Trump's petty personal grievances that he's held on to since his first term, absolutely part of it. For me, when I watched this story unfolding last night, because I was up really late, I'm running on no sleep, immediately I was like, oh yeah, as with anything the regime does, this is definitely about the Epstein files. Huge distraction. Pam Bondi and the DOJ were supposed to release all of this information, and they've been really slow rolling that, right? They have missed the deadline, and they're continuing to stall. They don't want us to see what's in there. Gosh, like a big distraction, like a war, that they're hoping that will pivot our attention away from all of the damning evidence in the Epstein files. When we're looking at the way that the fascists stack those functions, that Donald Trump stacks those functions intentionally or not, always a function of everything they do is to be a distraction from the Epstein files, or to stall the release of that information to prevent Jeffrey Epstein's victims from getting justice. That's always baked into every action that they take. And the choice of the regime to take this dramatic action, I think, really speaks to their precarious position. It speaks to their vulnerability and their weakness, not just from the Epstein files, but because the economy is in a really, really dire state. Public opinion is turned very heavily against the Republicans. We're rolling into a midterm election cycle, and it's not boding well for Donald Trump and the Republicans at all. Trump is deeply, deeply unpopular. He's wrecking everything, everywhere. A majority of Americans are opposed to Trump's immigration efforts. We don't want an ethnic cleansing in this country. Trump wants us to stop talking about affordability. He says the affordability crisis is a hoax. Again, I don't know if that's your lived experience or not. There's just so many ways that all of the fuck-ups, intentional or not, that this regime has inflicted on the American economy, the American people, the stability of our nation, that puts the regime in a position of profound weakness, and they know it. And this choice to attack Venezuela, right? Like, this is definitely a cope. This is definitely a very typical action from a fragile narcissist and also a fragile autocratic regime to try to flex and seem like they're big and powerful. Big guy attacks small guy, claims this is a necessary action and a show of force, a show of prowess. But it's just like, it's such an obvious move that comes from a position of weakness. And so when I first saw this story breaking, I was like, oh yeah, we all knew something like this was coming. And pretty much nothing that Donald Trump does should surprise us. Not only is there the Project 2025 playbook, but he's following all of the very predictable steps that would-be autocrats follow. He's behaving in the way that a brittle, frail, aging narcissist is likely to behave. So yes, it's about oil. Yes, it's about capitalism. Yes, it's about petty grievances. Yes, it's about the Epstein files. Yes, it's about how profoundly weak the regime is. And I haven't seen a lot of people doing their analyses, but this morning I did watch Heather Cox Richardson's video because a bunch of people sent it to me. And I felt like she had a lot of useful perspective, but there was a part of it where I'm not entirely sure that I agree. I know we could talk about how Donald Trump is likely a Russian asset and the way that he, at the very least, idolizes Putin and wants to be like Putin. He is a cargo cult version of what Putin actually is. And how Putin himself is not actually operating from a position of strength right now, right? He's lost, over 1 million Russian soldiers in his conflict with Ukraine, a war that he thought was going to last 3 days. Putin is basically destroying the viability and the economy of Russia. He's running that country into the ground, which is exactly what Donald Trump wants to do and will do here should his regime continue to operate in the same manner in which they have begun over the last year. So I get that there is this comparison that's very easily drawn between Putin attacking Crimea, Putin attacking Ukraine, all of Putin's acts of aggression. I think he, recently put missiles in Belarus. There was a recent attack on Poland, right? Like Putin has his fragile vision of sort of like reclaiming the Soviet Union. And I get all of that and the ways that we can look at what Donald Trump is doing, his attack on Venezuela, the way he just threatened Mexico. And we could say, oh, he wants to be a little carbon copy, a little emulator of Vladimir Putin. I don't think that that's wrong, but I know Heather was saying, well, this is about Donald Trump sort of legitimizing Putin's actions, right? Because if we are attacking Venezuela, then the world order of like big country attack small country equals, bad and wrong. That's all blown to hell. And so Trump maybe is doing this in order to assist Putin. I don't think so. Putin is pretty committed to his plan, whether or not Trump is going to go attack other countries. I do think this is just sort of indicative of the kind of personality that these men have in common, although Donald Trump is sort of a pale facsimile of Putin's ruthlessness and Putin's intellect. So I'm just not sure that I buy the argument of like, if we're attacking Venezuela, then we can't criticize Putin for attacking Ukraine. Donald Trump's been pretty much in Putin's pocket this entire time. And to me, I'm still baffled by the way conservative America has so quickly switched from being staunchly allied with Ukraine to being like, oh, maybe we will cozy up to Russia. Suddenly we're no longer upset with Putin. I guess all that Russian propaganda has worked really well on MAGA. So I'm not sure if it's particularly useful to speculate excessively about all of the different functions that they've stacked into this horrible illegal action. I do think the big takeaway is that this is a show of weakness. It is not a show of strength. The same way Donald Trump's desperate attempt to put the National Guard in our cities was a show of tremendous weakness. The same way his bombing in Iran was a show of weakness. The same way the bombing in Nigeria was a show of weakness. This is not somebody who is ruling from a position of strength with the support of the people. So the question then becomes, if the regime is weak and the people are powerful, how is it that we are going to organize in response to this, to utilize our power? My real question is not why did they do this, but what's our next move?